Hello there, got another tape that we need to repair here. We've got this firm cassette where the tape has actually come undone, and we're going to show you how we will break this open to get into the tape and then actually do the repair. Now, I'm with Audio Mover. What we do here at Audio Mover is we take old audio and video tapes and we turn them into digital. That's why we do these videos. We don't actually convert these kinds of tapes to digital though, because these are copyrighted, but we track some of these down that have these that are broken, and then we can show you how we go through the process of actually repairing a tape like this. The firm, if you don't remember, I remember how many of us were so excited when this band was put together and it was announced the album was going to come out, because of course this is Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. I think this is really the first thing he did post Led Zeppelin. Paul Rodgers, this is kind of after Bad Company. And then he had Tony Franklin and Chris Slade, who are lesser known. Chris Slade went on, he's a bald guy, went on to play with AC/DC, so you probably saw him in some AC/DC. I think he played on one album, if I'm not mistaken. And then Tony Franklin, who was a bass player, and he played with so many different people. I think he ended up in Whitesnake at one point. And anyway, but this album, The Firm, we were so excited because this was going to be Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers. Paul Rodgers had such a great voice. He was so awesome. I loved Paul Rodgers. And then it came out, and I think that there was a lot of and I know that's the way it was for me. I was a kid, and I didn't even know that much about Led Zeppelin at the time. I mean, I guess I wasn't that young. I was 15, 16, but I was just kind of figuring all this stuff out. And yeah, when did this come out? Yeah, 1985. So I was actually fairly familiar with Zeppelin at the time, and it just wasn't, it was kind of underwhelming. Radioactive came out, and we all heard that. That was the first single that came out before the album was released, as I recall, and it was kind of like, yeah, that was kind of cool. It's grown on me since. Actually, I like it a lot more now. And then, but the one that came out that was really awesome, so that's Radioactive. That was the last one on side one. And then on side two, Satisfaction Guaranteed. That one, oh my gosh, I love that song. I still love that song. It's so cool. And matter of fact, getting ready to do this video, I put it on. And it does, there is some, you can sense the Jimmy Page in it. You know, there is a little bit of Led Zeppelin flair in that song that you can pick up, and just by the way it's produced. And anyway, Satisfaction Guaranteed, what a cool song. So anyway, if you look at this tape, you'll see that the tape is not, you don't see any tape there. There's no leader tape, there's no oxide tape. And if you kind of, it's hard to see in there, but you can see maybe a little bit of blue right there. That's the leader tape. And then the oxide tape is the brown. And my guess is what happened is that the leader tape and the oxide tape probably just came apart. Hey, hold on for just a second. We'll get right back to the video. But if you like this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, with that, back to the video. And when somebody was playing it. And which is kind of typical with these old tapes, because they were literally held together by a piece of adhesive. It was very little different than just Scotch tape, really, for all intents and purposes. And just over time, if you've seen a piece of Scotch tape that's 30 years old or whatever, you'll see it just kind of flakes off. And then what'll happen is tapes that'll get sent in here to the studio, you know, they'll send them in, they'll say, I don't know, it's broken, it won't play, and we look at it, and then we have to open it up and make the repair. And like I said, we don't digitize this kind of tape because it's copyrighted, but we do cassette tapes, of course. And we do them for people have recordings of birthdays and bar mitzvahs and piano recitals. You'd be amazed. And recordings of their grandparents' interviews. You'd be amazed at all the stuff we get. We're really well known in the industry for doing large quantities. I mean, we did a project once where one client sent in, believe it or not, 115,000 cassette tapes to our studio to convert. So we're really well known in the industry for doing the large quantities. So of course we get this kind of thing, get tapes that are broken all the time that we have to fix. And in this case, one of the things that's important to note about this is that there's no way to get into it. A tape, a lot of the tapes that you would buy, like a TDK or a Maxell, some nicer tapes, would have screws in all four corners, and then they'd have one right there. So there'd be 5 screws, and then you just could undo the screws and then lift it open and then make the fix. This one's not like that. And so what we have to do is literally break into it and to get to the tape to fix it. And the way we normally do this, we literally have to crack into the shell, and you'll see that there's a seam that goes along right there, and there's a seam that goes along right there and right there. And if you look right kind of inside there, you'll see there's another seam. And I don't think that where they have these kind of plastic welded, I don't know what you call it, shut or together, they don't do it as much, at least most of my experience on the seam that goes through here, and it's sometimes easier to break through there, but it's also seems a little thinner, so we don't have a lot of success with that. So we usually start with the right protect spots right here. Now I don't know what's going to happen. We've torn these things apart so badly that it was just destroyed the case, which isn't a big deal, by the way, because we can take the reels out and just set them in another shell, like a TDK or a Maxell or something that's a little nicer, and it'll just play fine. You won't even know the difference. So we do what we can to preserve the shell, but we can't always. Sometimes it just tears and rips, and it's just the way it goes. And so, but this is the way we usually do this. And so normally the first thing we do is just do one of those just to see if we can kind of loosen it up a little bit and break some of the seams, the seals. And that actually you can see that got that front part in there kind of to open up a little bit. You can see that you can kind of peek down into it like that. So now that we've kind of broken that seal, we're going to go through here to these right protect tabs and try to pry those open. Now, if you don't know what this is, if you owned cassette tapes when you were younger, or if you just ever owned cassette tapes and you recorded over them, there's usually a little tab that sits right there, and it kind of covers up those holes. And what that does is it enables you to record over the tape. When you remove those holes, those little tabs, and you make it a hole, it disables the record button on the tape player. And the way it works is when you put a tape into a tape player, there's kind of this little, I don't know what you call it, like a button that just kind of sits in there, and as you put the tape in, it kind of falls into the hole like that, and that disables the record button. So when these record companies would put out a tape, they would naturally have those out so you couldn't accidentally record over your tape. But it's actually really simple. All you would need to do is take a little piece of Scotch tape or anything like that and just put it over the hole like so, and then you'd be able to record over. Had somebody on one of the comments on one of our videos say they'd take a little piece of paper, roll it up, and stuff it in there, and that works too. The point is to just make it so that little button won't go down into the hole, and then you can record over the tape. And so, yeah, these tapes will work like any other tape that you buy at the store, and you can record over it. You just have to cover up that little hole. Okay, so don't mean to be talking about that so much, but here we go. We're going to try to pry this open a little bit. And like I said, we never know. There we go. So you can see that one kind of cracked. That gets us started right there. That's what we're after. Okay, now the other thing that you need to remember. So this screwdriver is a little more robust than this one is, but we start off with one that's just a little stronger, but then I move to one that's kind of a flathead. And what's really important is to use a screwdriver that's not magnetized. A lot of these small screwdrivers have a magnet in them, so that when you take the screws out, you can kind of lift it out. It's a jewelry type thing, these little screwdrivers. But it's a good idea to use one that's not magnetized, and the reason is this tape right here, the oxide tape, is magnetized. That's how the audio signal's stored on there. And you can actually damage the audio on the tape if you get a magnet too close to it. Now, the little magnets on a screwdriver, I don't know. I used to be a professional musician. I spent a lot of time in recording studios. And I remember one time we had our 2-inch tapes lined up outside the control room, and we're getting ready to go in and get set up, and somebody brought in a big amplifier and set it next to the speakers or next to the tapes, and our producer just about lost it, just started yelling, and I mean he was so mad. These are going to be ruined. You're blah, blah. Well, I don't know. I mean, we put them on and listened and everything and played and recorded them. I never heard anything, but theoretically, taking those tapes, putting them too near a speaker, and maybe it did damage them and I just couldn't hear it. But the point is, you want to keep away from having magnets, and sometimes these little screwdrivers will be magnetized, and if you get them too close to the thing, supposedly, and not theoretically, it can damage the audio. So now, this one's actually coming apart pretty easily. The other thing we have to be careful of is the audio, comes up kind of around there. And we just got to be careful as we get the screwdriver in there not to damage the oxide. And I'm pretty good at it, not doing that, but every once in a while if we slip or something. But this one's coming apart pretty well. So it seems there we go. So now we're just going to be able to lift that off, and there you go. And there's the inside of the Firm's debut album tape right here. So, and you kind of get a sense or take a look at what's going on here. Now, this didn't look like this before. It looks like that now just because of opening it up and the way we set it in here. But let me just show you what's in here for just a second. So you see if you've ever seen inside of a tape before. So there's a few different things to look at. First thing is we have this little, this little gasket. I've heard it called a slip sheet before. And what this is it's basically this very low friction piece of material. So then you'll see it's on both sides. And what that does is it keeps this tape from rubbing on the plastic. And it does one other thing. And you'll see that it's kind of ridged. In this one, you can actually see it really well. And all these little sheets are different. This one's very, very obvious. You'll see all these little ridges through here. And you'll see that where they are, there's not one right there, but where they are is right where the tape is. And you can actually see a circle right there where the tape is rubbed on it. And you'll see that it's especially rubbed on these raise points. And the point there is when you're playing it, it makes sure that it spools up on the reel very cleanly. And then it has less tendency to falling off and what have you, but it just keeps it anyway. Just that little bit of pressure coming up on both sides helps it spool on very smooth. So the other thing is, and if you've watched other videos, you've seen other variations of this. There's always these two little wheels. Whenever I say always with things like this, it's never always, most of the time. There were so many varieties of this. I mean, over the years, I've seen so many. You'd be amazed at all the variations of this stuff that we've seen. But most of the time, you have little wheels right here. And you can see that they spin freely. And the idea is the tape kind of goes around this post right here. It'll go around this wheel and then cross this way around that wheel, around that post, and there you go. Now in this case, and I'm just going to lean it up so you can kind of see it, you can see that that little post right there is a little piece of metal. And if you see on this side, you'll see that that post goes into a little hole right there, and there's a corresponding hole on that side. And so sometimes when you open it up, I think we have a video where this actually happened, I think, where it took so much struggle getting it open that it actually broke a little piece of that plastic and we couldn't get the post to sit correctly again. Anyway, but it just kind of sets in there with pressure, that little post. And then the wheel just kind of sits over it. And then it just helps it move smoothly through the mechanism. Okay. The other things are, here's this little piece of metal, and that goes right there. And it's just kind of a little magnetic barrier. Goodness, I'm not getting that in there right. And it's very simple. I can't get that to go into the slot. There we go. By the way, when you do this, because you end up handling the tape and everything, it's a good idea to wash your hands really, really well. Because you're going to end up touching things. I've tried doing this with gloves and stuff in the past, and it's not realistic. And anyway, just wash your hands really well so you're not getting oils and things all over it. Basically, what happens here, whenever you're playing a tape, especially if you're recording on it, the playhead, this is on your, let's just say this is your tape deck, in your tape deck. When you push play, it goes up there, touches the tape, and there's oftentimes a little record or a little erase head right next to it. So if you're recording over the tape, that when that little erase head goes, when there's a little magnetic field being generated right there, and this piece of metal just protects the tape from anything that's going on right here. That's kind of the idea. The next thing to look at is this thing called a pressure pad. Now, normally we don't have tapes break like this one did. The most common problem with cassette tapes is this little pad. You'll see that it's on this little piece of copper. That little pad will just fall off because similar to the tape that has this little adhesive that holds those pieces together, it's just glued on there, or somehow there's some adhesive. And what happens is over time, that adhesive breaks down and those pads just, yeah, I got that in there right. Those pads just kind of fall off. And we've had projects that get sent into us where we get boxes and boxes of tapes from government agencies, churches, that kind of thing. And we'll open up the box and start taking the tapes out. And on the bottom of the box, they're just covered with these little pads. And it's just because they just fall off. And if they fall off, the tape doesn't sound as good. And if you have tapes like this, that you bought at the store that are a band that were produced by a record company, there's a really good chance you have some that it's fallen off. Matter of fact, some of these videos, we just go to old record stores and things and find these so we can show you examples of that, and they're all over the place. I mean, you go to your local thrift store or record store and start flipping through their tapes and you're going to find them. And that just falls off. And the idea is that when you push play on your tape deck, the playhead, again, goes up and it touches the tape, but it uses that little thing. You'll see that little bit of give. As it touches it, the tape runs in between the two things, and it helps the tape head in your tape deck get a really solid connection with the tape. And that way it ensures that you're getting a really solid sound. What happens, especially as tapes age, is they warp even just a tiny little bit. And as they're going across, if that pad falls off, they don't really get a really solid connection to the tape, and it starts to drop out a little bit. It sounds a little tinny. It loses its quality. And so it's a good idea whenever you're playing a tape. And by the way, if you ever sent a tape into our studio, it's the first thing we do. We take the tape out of the case and we just look, is the pressure pad there? And if it's not, we replace it. And if you need to replace this, these are generally universal. You could go to an old Maxell or TDK tape and tape one out and put it in here and it'll work fine. But you also, if it falls off, a lot of times you'll find it sitting inside the tape or inside the case, in the jewel case, or you might even find it, or just pull one off of an old tape somewhere and just glue it on. You don't even have to open it up. Just kind of set it in there and glue it on that little mount and you'll be fine. It'll work fine. Okay, so now let's take a look at what went wrong with this tape. So actually we want to put the tape on this side. And you'll see it's pretty easy to move these around. Just pick it up. As I was saying a little while ago, you could literally take these things and put them into another tape housing, and it would work fine, another shell. So, okay, what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of spool this up a little bit so we don't have so much flipping and flopping around. I'm going to move this out of the way now. And then we're just going to kind of show you what happened here. You can see it's just kind of as I suspected, because it's pretty normal. It wasn't saying anything amazing. This is a very typical kind of thing that happens. And if it happens on this end, there's a really good chance that when it gets to the other end of the tape, that side's going to break too. Just because the adhesive on these things, if it's been sitting and it's wearing out, it'll both ends of the tape will wear out about the same, about the same time. So the leader, this is generally speaking a little more robust, and this is what you use to connect to the little reel. And you'll see that the way they do that here is they've got just a little divot that's in the reel, and they have this little post. So then they just they put the tape in there, jam that post in there, and then that's what holds it to the reel. And this is a pretty good design. We've seen a lot where this is a much bigger piece, and due to the polymer of tape, sometimes it'll break down and that piece will just fall out, and then that's a whole nother thing. And we actually have a big bag filled with these reels too, just to replace those. Again, we do this all the time. So it's a very typical thing for us to have to deal with. So I'm going to show you what we normally do here. What we have to do is get these two pieces basically just to touch together again like that. That's it. Very simple. It's going to be an easy fix. The important thing, and we've seen people that have fixed these things on their own before, and one of the mistakes people make is they'll put the repair on this side, or they'll put it all the way around. Don't do that. Just put it on the inside. The repair needs to be coming from this direction, not this direction, because the playhead on your tape deck is this side, and you don't want the adhesive. The playhead's generally kind of a delicate thing, and you don't want the adhesive getting any gunk on it or rubbing across it. So you put the repair on the other side, and then you do it in such a way so that there's really so that the adhesive's not exposed. And what we'll do, honestly, is we just very simply will take a little piece of, you'll see that I just took a piece of Scotch tape. This is all I'm using. And it works fine. And you get a piece just ever so slightly smaller than the tape. You can buy repair kits, and I've used them before, but I've done this so many times now that, I don't know, I just don't bother with it anymore. And it's just, I've gotten to the point that this, and honestly, when people send tapes into the studio, our goal is to play it one time and digitize it, and then that's the end of it. So we're not super stressed about this, this perfect, but I'll be honest with you, these will work fine, and they'll probably work forever. So I got it a little bit of an angle right there, so I'm just going to cut off kind of a little bit of that edge. Again, the main thing is we just don't want any exposed when it goes across the playhead. So there's that. So then again, on this side, we just want it, right. Oh goodness, I usually do it the other direction because I'm right-handed, so I'm backwards, but I'll still get this. Okay. And this, working with this oxide tape it can be a pain. The oxide gets really, really, it can get really challenging to work with. If you've ever worked with this, you know what I'm talking about. Especially if you've ever worked with microcassettes. Because one of the things you might not realize, goodness, I gotta make sure I'm doing this on the right side. One of the things you might not realize is that the reason, the way you make tapes longer, for example, if you have a 60-minute tape or a 90-minute tape, the way they make a tape 60 minutes or 90, you'll notice if you looked inside the tape, it doesn't look like there's more tape. It looks like there's the same amount of actual oxide tape in there, and that's because there is. The thing that what they do is they just make it thinner, and then that makes for a tape that can get really, really hard to manage. There you go. So that's it. You just make it, and you'll see how it spans the two sides right there. That one's not that pretty. It's not a pretty repair, but the reality of it is it'll work. It'll work fine, and it'll probably work forever. Well, until this adhesive breaks down, but it'll work just fine. And again, we do this all the time. And you'll see, again, it's on the inside. So as it spools up, it's going to go on the inside of the tape. So now I'm going to spool that in. You'll see I'm kind of, because it flips around and flops, I'm kind of holding this down just slightly with my fingers, just putting a little bit of pressure on it. And then this side, of course, goes over there. We're going to run it around the two edges there, and there you go. And that's really, for all intents and purposes, that's the fix. Now we have to put it back together, which we'll do right now. And sometimes getting these things right here to set over it can be a little bit challenging because the leader tape wants to push outside of it. You just have to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we just kind of keep it a little bit tight, just like so. Tight enough. And then when we put it back together, this isn't held on with any adhesive, this little sheet, that little gasket thing, but it tends to just stay on. And so we'll see if it does or not. What is that little, looks like that. You can see that over the years, whoever played this, a little bit of that oxide's worn off right there onto that little spot right there. Okay. Anyway, so we're just going to put this back on. And usually it should just sit on. The only problem that you ever really have with these, again, is those little metal posts sometimes not lining up. And that kind of doesn't feel like it lined up. Yeah, I guess it did. Other tapes, the kind that have the screws, sometimes you'll kind of feel it snap a little bit. This one didn't do that. So, okay, that's it. So that's all you have to do. That puts it together, but still, of course, we need to seal it. So really at this point, all I do, take a little piece of Scotch tape and just put one on each side. And then this tape will actually play fine. And for our purposes here in the studio, if we were digitizing this, that would take care of it. And this would be good enough that we'd be able to play it on one of our machines. And you'll see here, I'll spin it so you can kind of see our repair. So I'm turning it, and there's our repair right there. And then that'll go across the head nice and smooth, and this will work just fine. And there you go. The Firm debut album lives to see another day, lives to play another day, and anyway, there you go. Hey, be sure and like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you have any other ideas or suggestions or input, or even have any comments about the Firm and this first album, I'd love to hear it. Anyway, with that, have a fantastic day.